Urgent! Is Kazakhstan now siding with Ukraine? Tokayev has seriously undermined Putin. Russian weapons flowing into Ukraine? Shocking turn of events. Russian firepower has shattered Russia's military might. These new defense technologies created an unprecedented global reaction. The front is on fire. Has Putin already crossed Pokrovsk off his bloody plans? New threats are emerging on the horizon. China has stabbed the Kremlin in the back, and Poland has found Russia's weak point. All the details in our special edition of Hotspot. Shocking! Putin humiliated. Tokayev strikes back. A sensational decision. Russian weapons from Kazakhstan flowing into Ukraine. Astana does what the Kremlin feared most. Ukraine celebrates. How did Kazakhstan finally break free from Moscow's influence? All details of this geopolitical shift. Watch now.
Kazakhstan, friendly to Putin, is supplying weapons to Ukraine. Octavian Berceanu, former head of Romania's National Environmental Guard, claims he was offered 10 million euros for a deal to import ammunition from Kazakhstan. The Russian-made ammunition was allegedly to be repainted and sold to Europe for further delivery to Ukraine.
Kazakhstan, however, is distancing itself from the war in Ukraine. Moreover, at one point, Ukrainian President Zelensky stated that he had offered the Russian dictator a meeting in Astana. To this, the president of Kazakhstan responded that his country is not a mediator between Russia and Ukraine. But in the event that there is a political necessity, then, accordingly, Kazakhstan will provide its own territory for an official meeting at the level of the heads of the two states if necessary.
According to Berchanov, he reported the offer to the law enforcement agencies and the National Anti-Corruption Bureau. At the same time, there was allegedly talk of another matter: the opening of a weapons or ammunition factory on the territory of Romania.
At the moment, it should be noted that Kazakhstan has chosen a strategy of maneuvering between the interests of its key political partners. These are first and foremost the United States, Russia, and China. It should be noted that despite the fact that Kazakhstan is a CSTO country, and moreover that Tokayev's regime actually came to power on, well, essentially with Russian support, at this point Kazakhstan is pursuing a policy that is almost independent from the Russian Federation.
Meanwhile, as a result of the Central Asia-US Summit, Kazakhstan has signed deals worth $17 billion.
We're talking about rare earth metals, primarily tungsten. In addition, agreements were signed on cooperation in the field of IT technologies. And there is a possible memorandum on the sale of 30 to 37 Boeing aircraft.
The president of Kazakhstan believes that the current US administration has a greater understanding of the importance of Central Asia, and he praised Trump for his more accommodating approach toward Russia. At the same time, Kassym-Jomart Tokayev calls a ceasefire in Ukraine possible and even praised Putin for his flexibility.
Kazakhstan was actually the first country within the OPEC organization to increase its oil production, despite corresponding opposition from the Russian side. Notably, this decision marked a significant moment. This triggered further chain reactions, namely the decision by OPEC countries themselves to increase oil production, which in turn led to a drop in prices and massive economic losses for the Russian Federation.
Kazakhstan is trying to maintain relations with both Russia and the United States, adopting a tactic of remaining silent about the war, but at the same time not supporting our country to the same extent as other European partners who consistently send aid packages to Ukraine.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism, and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now.
Right now, Ukraine is shocking the world again. Our actions are making the Kremlin gasp for air. The enemy's ambitions for dominance are falling apart. Ukraine's power machine is running non-stop. Drones tear through the sky. Missiles hit with pinpoint accuracy, and artillery paints vast maps of fire. Ukraine's defense industry is earning standing ovations from the West. What other top-secret cutting-edge weapons are the armed forces unveiling? You'll find out in just a moment.
Self-propelled artillery, mortars, drones, electronic warfare, shells, ammunition, communication systems, air defense, missiles. Ukraine is actively ramping up the production of its own military equipment and munitions. Production is becoming increasingly precise, large-scale, and technologically advanced.
During this war, Ukraine has already reached the point where almost 60% of the weapons we have, the weapons our soldiers use, are Ukrainian-made. And these are powerful weapons with many advanced features.
This is no longer just a local industry. Ukraine is building its own military technological shield, a network of production lines, testing grounds, and combat units that turn ideas into weaponry. And our specialists immediately test them in real-world conditions.
The Ukrainian side is scaling up precisely those strike systems with a range of over 1,000 kilometers.
Let's start with drones, those small but decisive pieces of technology that overnight changed the rules of war. The FP family of strike platforms and other Ukrainian models are produced according to the principle: fast, cheap, and effective. Their advantage lies in the simplicity of their design, the speed of production, and the relevance of their tactics. They make it possible to deliver pinpoint strikes, disrupt enemy logistics, and keep enemy positions under pressure far from the front line.
In 2024, about 1 million units were contracted, and by 2025, production had increased to 30,000 FPV drones per month. It should be noted that this quantity, that is the annual production of about 4 million FPV drones, is a record figure, even taking into account the capabilities of the military-industrial complexes of all NATO countries combined. In other words, at this particular moment, the Ukrainian Ukroboronprom is currently producing an unprecedented number of unmanned aerial vehicles. For comparison, the United States Army adds approximately up to 100,000 unmanned aerial vehicles to its arsenal each year. Once again, I want to emphasize that the Ukrainian defense industry produces up to 4 million drones.
The technological production recipe is simple: composite fuselages, 3D printed wings, inexpensive components, and open source navigation solutions. All this makes it possible to produce functional platforms in batches. But you can't cut costs on electronics. Navigation and guidance systems make the drones resistant to Russian electronic warfare. Otherwise, mass waves of launches won't break through the enemy's dense defenses. At the same time, a strategic direction is developing alongside drones. Here, the key players are missiles and missile systems, which strike at the enemy's rear, depriving them of fuel, depots, and command nodes. Neptune is a domestic anti-ship and coastal missile system that has strengthened the security of maritime borders and given Kiev tools to impact the enemy's logistics in the Black Sea.
There is an unprecedented case in world history where Ukraine, as a country that essentially does not possess a navy, inflicted severe damage on the Russian Federation by destroying up to 35% of the Black Sea Fleet's vessels. According to the British side, the naval activity of the Russian Federation in the Black Sea Basin has dropped to a historic minimum as a result of the use of strike drones and, accordingly, naval drones.
Another important milestone is the FPV-5 Flamingo cruise missile. This is a completely Ukrainian development with a declared range of up to 3,000 kilometers.
For comparison, the legendary American Tomahawk has a strike range of 1,600 kilometers. The Tomahawk's warhead is about 500 kilograms, while the Flamingo's warhead is around 1,150 kilograms. The most recent documented use of the Flamingo was a strike on the oil terminal in Tuapse. Moreover, Russian public channels themselves confirmed that the Ukrainian side used these strike assets.
By combining small drones and large cruise missiles, Ukraine gains both scale and strategy. Drones keep the enemy on edge, missiles strike critical targets, and together this seriously undermines the enemy's ability to wage a prolonged war. But Ukraine's defense industry is not just about small and large systems, but also time-tested developments like the Bodana, Stugna, and other artillery and anti-tank systems, which provide mobility, firepower resilience, and operate within a unified strike network. Drone reconnaissance, artillery adjustment, precision missile strike, and so the cycle repeats.
40% of the Russian budget depends on revenue from the sale of oil and petroleum products. And accordingly, taking into account this budget-forming sector of the occupier country's economy, adjustments are made to the actions of the Ukrainian side, specifically the use of strike drones and means of destruction, namely Flamingo and Neptune, at the moment of neutralizing the oil refining complex of the Russian Federation. According to the Russian side's estimates, the losses resulting from the Ukrainian strike on the oil refining complex of the Russian Federation are valued at around $100 billion.
Ukraine's production capabilities are already extending beyond its borders. According to agreements and joint projects, Ukrainian companies are localizing assembly and serial production in European countries. If before the start of the full-scale war, the Ukrainian defense industry was lagging behind, then by 2024 production volumes had reached about $9 billion, and in 2025 they grew to $35 billion. Plans for 2026 include scaling up to $60 billion. And this is only the beginning.
Pokrovsk, new details from the battlefield. Putin is now putting his soldiers on motorcycles and sending them straight into the frontline meat grinder. These images must be seen to be believed. Ukraine's defenders are holding the line with incredible courage. The enemy resorts to shameless deception but gets an instant and crushing response. Shock on the front. Something unprecedented has happened. The first details are coming up. Don't miss what happens next.
Russian troops in a Mad Max style are invading the devastated Ukrainian city of Pokrovsk. That was the headline of a Reuters article about the situation around this city in the Donbass.
Moscow claims that capturing Pokrovsk, which Russian media call the gateway to Donetsk, will allow it to advance north toward the two largest Ukrainian-controlled cities remaining in Donetsk region, Kramatorsk and Sloviansk.
Russia has been trying to take Pokrovsk for over a year now. At first, there were attempts to encircle the city and cut off its logistics in order to threaten supply lines. Now the tactic is infiltration and the buildup of small groups within the city. But time goes on and the city still stands.
According to Putin's decisions, Pokrovsk and Mirnograd were supposed to be taken sometime at the end of last year, probably in December 2024. Well, now a year has passed and they still haven't been taken, even though the situation there is very serious. In
the command of the airborne assault troops, they note that the occupier is trying to sneak into the city in small groups using the fog. The Russian army has been using infiltration tactics for several weeks now. In
recent times, the Russians have stepped up their efforts to infiltrate Pokrovsk using light vehicles through the southern outskirts. To do this, the enemy has taken advantage of unfavorable weather conditions, particularly dense fog. This reduces the effectiveness of our aerial reconnaissance and our ability to strike in open areas. Currently, there are more than 300 Russians in the city. Their objective remains unchanged, to reach the northern borders of Pokrovsk, followed by an attempt to encircle the agglomeration. 7th Air Assault Corps.
According to Ukrainian intelligence, the latest deadlines for the capture of Pokrovsk are set for December 15th and for Kupiansk by the end of the year. The enemy is probing the Ukrainian defenses along almost the entire front line in order to find places for new offensives. Now this concerns the Zaporizhzhia direction.
Russia has also intensified its activity in the Novopavlivka direction. In this sector, the enemy has made advances over the past few months and now they are trying to stretch our defensive line along the front. Advancing not only in the Pokrovsk direction near Pokrovsk and Mirnograd, but also trying to expand offensive actions into the Zaporizhzhia and Dnipropetrovsk regions.
In the Zaporizhzhia direction, using fog as cover, the occupying army captured 3 settlements. This was stated by Commander-in-Chief Syrsky.
The situation has significantly worsened in the Oleksandrivka and Huliaipole directions, where the enemy, taking advantage of numerical superiority in manpower and equipment during fierce fighting, advanced and captured 3 settlements. Alexander Syrsky, Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of Ukraine.
Ukrainian defenders were forced to withdraw from Rivnopilia in the Zaporizhzhia region to more advantageous positions in order to save as many of their soldiers' lives as possible. The enemy, in its attempts to advance, is suffering huge losses, and just in the past day, the armed forces of Ukraine eliminated 58 Russian soldiers in this direction, with about 30 more wounded.
As a result of a comprehensive fire attack on our positions in the Rivnopilia area, and in order to preserve the lives of personnel, Ukrainian units moved to more advantageous positions. The enemy's advance has been stopped. Efforts to block and comprehensively strike the enemy continue. Fierce fighting also continues in Kazakhstan, in other sectors along the line of engagement in these directions. The defense forces of southern Ukraine.
There are 500 to 600 shellings using 2,000 munitions. As a result of this fire impact, all positions, shelters and fortifications in some settlements have been virtually destroyed and demolished. The enemy is now trying to bring in consolidation groups, but the defense forces are striking them and preventing them from gaining a foothold in these settlements.
The USSR continues to inflict significant losses on the enemy in manpower and equipment while simultaneously destroying its offensive potential in rear areas.
The Kremlin is losing its sovereignty. China is taking over Moscow. Putin is isolated. Xi Jinping has chosen Trump. Shocking turn of events. How will Beijing's new position change the course of the war in Ukraine? Russia is turning into a full-fledged vassal state, losing any remaining leverage on the global stage. All details of this geopolitical earthquake coming up next.
The collapse of Putin's empire. Russia has ceased to be a center of influence and power.
There's no need to be afraid. Whoever starts to panic will lose everything right away. But it's absolutely necessary to understand what might happen.
Still, this won't really change the situation because the invasion of Ukraine became not just a military but also a geopolitical suicide for the Kremlin. And while Putin is preoccupied with the war, China is taking over Russia's economic and political positions from the Caucasus to the Caspian Sea. Simply put, Moscow is losing influence in places where it had been considered a leading player for decades.
For China, this is an opportunity to strengthen its presence in the region, to advance its own political and economic projects. And China is taking full advantage of this. In fact, this doesn't just apply to Central Asia. We see similar trends on the African continent and in Latin America as well.
The countries of Central Asia have already stopped viewing Moscow as a key center. After all, it has become clear that Russia is not only weakened by sanctions and isolation, but is also turning into a toxic partner.
Many of them articulate a position known as a multi-vector policy, but under this guise, they are really expressing their own understanding of global processes and the fact that Russia is no longer able to maintain its previous status as a hegemon in these regions. So today, to a large extent, the main struggle is really about who can offer the very best possible terms to all of these countries and ultimately who will become their most important and primary ally.
Since the launch of the Belt and Road Initiative, China has been steadily expanding its influence in Central Asia. It is funding roads, railway hubs, pipelines and more, turning the region into a new transit bridge between Asia and Europe, bypassing Russian territory.
And Russia, having thrown all its resources into waging war against Ukraine, has significantly weakened in terms of global influence. If you look at the global geopolitical map, the trends for Putin and for Russia are very discouraging. Putin, who dreamed of strengthening his empire by conquering Ukraine or by weakening Ukraine and extending his influence over that territory, has in fact lost all his international standing and has gone from being a global player to a regional dictator today.
In 2024, China's trade with Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan amounted to almost $95 billion. This is more than double the Russian figure.
Essentially, this is China's fundamental strategy. First economic, and then, as a consequence, political expansion. Therefore, as we know, according to the laws of balance, when something decreases somewhere, something else will inevitably increase. And it is obvious that Russian influence is being rapidly displaced both in Central Asia and in other regions, which allows China not only to expand its influence, but also to gain the ability to sell goods, to influence regimes, and to strengthen its international position and coalition.
The eastern regions of Russia are also in the crosshairs of the Celestial Empire. According to economic experts' forecasts, the volume of Chinese investment in the region could reach 1 trillion rubles by 2025. Thus, the Kremlin risks losing control over 40% of its own territory.
The loss of influence by Russia means a strengthening of China as a global player and as one of the main centers of a global political movement. As for the future prospects when it comes to Russia, they unfortunately really do not look very promising at all.
And yet another blow to the Russian Federation from China. Chinese oil refiners have started refusing to purchase Russian oil after the US and other Western countries imposed sanctions against Russia's leading producers and some of their clients. At the same time, the US is also stepping up its presence in Central Asia, seeking to strengthen its partnership with the region and limit Chinese-Russian influence.
Washington fully understands China's desire to exert influence over this important region and is now actively trying to counteract it, especially in the context of the ongoing confrontation between Washington and Beijing. And Trump's meeting with the leaders of the 5 Central Asian countries is essentially nothing more than a response to the developments and events that in fact have long been taking place under the framework of China's initiative.
Putin is slowly but surely losing Central Asia. Russia is losing its authority in the countries of the former USSR, which the Kremlin has always regarded as its satellites.
Urgent! You need to see this. A sharp, unexpected move from Poland. Warsaw is switching to maximum capacity and flooding the front with weapons. The Kremlin is in complete shock. Armored vehicles roll straight off the production line toward the front. Ammunition trains stand ready, and artillery is already on the way. And this is far from the full scale of support from our ally. What else is Warsaw keeping in its aid arsenal? And how will it change the situation on the front line? Don't miss what comes next in our report.
More than 120 billion zlotys, or $4 billion. This is the impressive amount Poland has spent on aid to Ukraine since the start of the full-scale invasion. This includes both humanitarian and military support.
Poland was one of the first countries to supply Ukraine with tanks, ammunition, and defense equipment on a large scale. In 2022 and 2023, it supplied in particular more than 300 tanks, as well as armored personnel carriers and artillery systems, air defense systems, drones, mortars, assault rifles, and over 100 million rounds of ammunition. 10 airplanes and 10 helicopters were also sent to Ukraine. Between 2022 and 2024, Poland provided Ukraine with 47 packages of military aid. The value of the equipment delivered in 2022 alone amounted to 7.23 billion zlotys, and in 2023 to 2024, an additional 5.63 billion. Poland also supplied more than 19,500 Starlink terminals, providing the Ukrainian armed forces with stable satellite communication. This accounted for almost half of all terminals used in Ukraine by the end of 2023.
Poland's assistance to Ukraine is not the result of romantic enthusiasm, but is very pragmatic. Our neighbors understand that if Ukraine falls, Poland will be next in line.
After all, a Ukraine at war gives Europe time to better prepare for threats. This time is needed, and we have no right to waste a single minute. We will be held accountable for every minute.
318 tanks were delivered to Kyiv by Warsaw. Among them were modernized T-72s, M1Rs, PT-91s, and Leopard 2S. This is more than anyone else has supplied. The total value of gratuitous aid, including training, logistics, repairs, and medical support, exceeded $4 billion by March of this year. Specifically, in 2022, it amounted to $1.6 billion. In 2023-24, it was $1.3 billion. Poland also delivered
Poland's military aid: 586 armored vehicles, 137 artillery systems, 10 Mi-24 helicopters, 10 MiG-29 fighter jets, 287 man-portable air defense systems, 44 air-to-air missiles, more than 100 units of small arms, 89 mortars, 4 Grad multiple rocket launchers, and over 100 million rounds of ammunition.
In addition to gratuitous aid, in just 2022 to 2023, Ukraine purchased weapons from Poland worth more than 2.2 billion euros. The largest contract was a deal for 54 Krab self-propelled howitzers. Of these, 36 have already been delivered. The countries are establishing joint production of weapons and equipment. The parties have agreed on the joint production of 125mm tank ammunition. There are also plans for joint production of other weapons and military equipment, including the placement of Polish companies' manufacturing facilities in Ukraine.
We need to mobilize the industry. Polish and Ukrainian industry should make joint investments not only during the war, but also to develop their deterrence potential. These initiatives are very much needed. It is also very important for us to improve economic relations. We will support Ukraine.
Poland has become the main hub for supplying weapons to Ukraine. Also, during the war, more than 30,000 Ukrainian soldiers have been trained on Polish territory. With each year of the war, Poland's assistance and cooperation with Ukraine only grows stronger.
At this moment, that's all from me, Maria Farafonova. Even more hellish frontline news in our next episode. But for now, don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button. See you soon!